The Biden campaign is looking for yet another reboot of not only their candidate, but the future of his candidacy. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Brian Lilley and Waren Kinsella. Waren, you worked for Joe Biden. You volunteered on his campaign. I think that there are certain times, and we've been in and around politics for a long time, longer than we'd like to admit, when someone has to say, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Whoever, it's time to retire. It's time for you to go. But instead, the Biden campaign seems to be digging in. They're saying that the president is going nowhere. All the knives are coming out, including from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who says, well, it's up to Biden to decide. Well, he has decided. He said multiple times. And now he's going to be prepared to do some more sit-down interviews. None of this is going well, Waren.
It's just not going to be enough. Like the damage, like 40 million people saw him look catatonic for 90 minutes. And I was one of them. And you guys know, I have great affection for that man. I thought that he was the solution to ridding us of Donald Trump, who is a bad choice as well. But like it just can't be fixed. He could do 100 push-ups and sit-ups on stage and it still would not repair the damage. Like Biden, the decision has been made. Like the gap is 6 points in swing states. Among independents, it's even more. Like he is going to be crushed. And we're talking not just the White House, we're talking about the Senate, we're talking about the House of Representatives too. Now you've got senators like Mark Warner and others coming out, along with Nancy Pelosi, as you pointed out, saying he's got to go. Like they're writing op-eds. It's not just like questions in a scrum. They're sitting down and writing 800-word arguments about why Joe Biden's got to go. So like he has to go. Right? If, you know, people care about the future of the greatest republic on earth, you know, we need to have, as Brian has said so many times, we got two lousy candidates for the president of the United States, and that's an important position. So, you know, I think there needs to be a change.
Brian, the Democrats have found themselves to be in a very uncomfortable position because had there been some honesty, had there been some truth about what was really going on with President Biden, who we now know, many have said they've seen this cognitive decline for some time now, and it's been quite dramatic, or I would say over the last 6 to 8 months. Had they known, they would have had a proper primary, they would have had a rigorous vote. But the very party who is saying that Donald Trump is supposedly the greatest threat to democracy, something which I think is utter nonsense, but they're saying that Trump is the biggest threat to democracy. Yet we have a president in there who, let alone they don't want as their candidate, I don't know how he serves out the rest of his term if they were being honest with themselves. And they want to potentially upend having Kamala Harris, the vice president, as their nominee, and say they have a mini primary, a speed dating primary, they're calling it. What is this party doing? If Trump is such a threat to democracy, nonsense. If that's the case, then why are they allowing Biden to carry on when it's so demonstrably true in the polling that he's going to lose in November?
I think that a year ago, they didn't see Biden this way. And I know some people say, oh, we knew about the cognitive decline 4 years ago. We knew his brain wasn't there. We knew it in 2020. No, look at the guy campaigning in 2020. And look at the guy now, and it's vastly different. Even a year ago, he was sharper. I would say since around the new year, it has been a slow but getting quicker roll down the hill with Biden and his walker taking him in the wrong direction. It's not good for him. So maybe they thought, well, we can get away with it, or it's not that bad. But Waren said 40 million people saw it. So just looking at the latest polls at 270towin.com, it was up to a 3-point gap nationally in favor of Trump. It's down to 2 right now. But when you look at the swing states, Trump ahead by 4 in Arizona, marginally ahead in Wisconsin, Georgia, which Biden won last time, 4-point lead for Trump, Michigan, virtually tied, North Carolina, 4-point lead for Trump, Nevada, 4.6% lead for Trump. Pennsylvania, Trump is ahead. If he wins all those states, he's the president. Those numbers have moved over the past few weeks. Why? Because of the debate, because of the George Stephanopoulos interview, which didn't really help on any front.
No.
And so, yeah, I think they thought they could get away with it. I think they thought it wasn't that bad. And now we can all see that things are going downhill. And for him to stay in, for people around him, including his wife, who is a doctor of some sort, not to say
she's a PhD. She's not the kind of doctor where you put up your hand to say if there's a medical emergency, just to be
okay,
clear.
well then, well then, find a real doctor and just end it somehow. Like they've got to put somebody else in, but now they've gone so far. There are, real obstacles. They've raised all this money. Can that be transferred to a new candidate? Can they get his name off the ballot in some states? So if they switch out for Kamala Harris, maybe that could happen. But what if they decide they want Gavin Newsom? Could Newsom be the official Democrat candidate, or is it too late in some places?
Well, it might very well be. It may very well be a Warren, because in order to run these campaigns, it's big money. It's over $1 billion to run for president now, and you see the big bundlers, meaning they're big fundraisers, including the Hollywood actor George Clooney, who just hosted a massive fundraiser for Joe Biden in California a few weeks ago. Recently wrote in the New York Times that this is not the guy that I saw in 2020 or a few weeks ago. He's the guy that we all saw on the debate stage. And once the money starts drying up, once the finances are no longer there, and once there's pressure for the Democrats to have to run ads and push in battleground states that were never battlegrounds anymore, New York, California, places where the Democrats just run the table, if they are forced to go in and spend money there, this has become a bigger problem if when the Democrats do replace Joe Biden, if that's where it gets to. Not the least of which is disenfranchising the vote of 14 million Democrats who voted for him in the primary.
Yeah, three big problems. He's got three big problems. You pointed out one, you cannot win the presidency without money. You need money to buy ads and hire staff and field workers and so on. And Democrats are voting with their checkbook and they're pulling back. There's the problem with the polls that Brian and I have pointed out, and the polls are not good. We're looking at a sweep up and down the ticket, and not just in the White House, but up and down the ticket. And the third big problem is they don't have a narrative. The White House doesn't have a narrative. Initially, they said, oh, he was jet lagged. And then it was pointed out to them, well, he'd been traveling like 2 weeks before. Hasn't he taken some naps since then? Then it became, oh, well, he has a cold. And they said, okay, well, have you had him see a doctor? And they're like, no, he hasn't seen a doctor. Well, I guess it wasn't that serious. Then it became, okay, well, we'll make sure that he goes to bed at 8 o'clock. So it's like, okay, Mr. Putin, make sure you shoot your warheads at 8:30 because the president, the leader of the free world, is going to be asleep. Like nothing is working. Nothing is working. And I don't say that with any joy or pleasure because I believe in this man, but that's past tense. I no longer do. If he says, as he has many times, I believe in this country, I love this country, and I want to prevent Trump from becoming president, he needs to prove it. And he needs to prove it by stepping aside and removing the biggest obstacle to Trump becoming a future Trump presidency. The biggest obstacle is him. He needs to go.
Brian, I think that there's a lot of concern in and around the White House for those staffers who, some of which are now going to be summoned by the House to come and talk about the big cover up here. And I think, we as conservatives certainly complain all the time. The media is always on conservatives. They treat us differently. And, they jump on the things that we say. Watching the media, the White House press gallery just turn on this presidency has been extraordinary and scary at times. I being a former press secretary, I feel a little bit for Karine Jean-Pierre standing up at that podium trying to answer the questions, especially when she doesn't have good answers to give. But as a human being, just like as a human being, I can sit back and just look at this situation and just think, whomever, if it's Jill Biden, if it's Hunter Biden, whomever it is around Joe, is making him go through this. They are, you know, I'll use Michael Moore's words, the worst form of elder abuse I've ever seen.
That term has been thrown around quite a bit, and I wouldn't argue with it. It's unfortunate to watch Biden in that position. Absolutely, I can feel for him, and I can feel for Karine Jean-Pierre. I mean, she's being asked, why did a Parkinson's specialist show up at the White House 3 times to meet with the president's doctor, and then has to say, can't talk about it. Sorry, but no, it's not the president, but I can't talk about it. That leaves her in a horrible position. You know, a friend spoke to a couple of the former press secretaries, including I forget who it was for Bill Clinton. They regret ever starting the daily press briefing. And I bet right now, Karine Jean-Pierre wishes she could end that tradition. It didn't used to happen every day. And somebody thought it would be a good idea for openness and transparency. Now, in a situation like this, nobody wants to be out talking. And the only question that they're going to get until Biden steps down is, when will he step down?
Waren, last word to you. If again, looking at this from our perch, you know, in the Great White North, who is in charge then? Because it's very obvious Joe Biden is not able to make hard decisions. It's been now quoted that he's reasonably available from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. But then after that, it trails off.
Nap time.
I mean, that's a scary proposition. As a Canadian, as we just talk about, you know, NATO and all these other big threats, we do rely on the United States to save our butts if something goes really sideways. Who is running this government? Who is in charge? Because it's not Joe Biden.
Well, there's a circle of people around him who, you know, one would hope are being ethical and responsible and being human beings, as you and Brian have both pointed out about this man. You know, I've spoken to a number of physicians. I know Brian has as well, as we've been following this incredible story. And the view seems to be that the president of the United States has Parkinson's. And my understanding of Parkinson's, so he's got all the symptoms. If you look at his debate performance, you know, it looks like that is what he's got. And with Parkinson's, you still have mental acuity. Your brain still functions, but your body starts to rebel against you, and you have good days and bad days. And it's, you know, what Brian said at the outset is so true. Like in the State of the Union, the guy was on fire and he was shooting off, you know, at Marjorie Taylor Greene and so on. And nobody was talking about this kind of stuff. And then he had a bad day, and that happened to be the debate day. So, you know, as you point out, and I think this is the best way to conclude, if you're president of the United States and you have an affliction as serious as Parkinson's or something else, you can't continue in that role. You know, the 25th Amendment kicks in and they need to be looking at replacing you. And I don't know whether that's Harris or somebody else, but clearly they need to do that because the stakes here are just way too high.
Well, we could have been spending the last 6 months feting Joe Biden as having one of the greatest presidencies, and he would have been marched out into political retirement with a positive notion that he's the one that beat Donald Trump. But instead, all we're talking about is his cognitive decline. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Go to thetorontosun.com. You're going to find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.